Okay, tomorrow I'm going to go for my scan results. I've been waiting for a week for them, which is quite soon really, which is better. What does this mean for me? Well, basically it's the results of a scan that will show how much this tumour is actually growing. It has started already, so it's either going to be growing enough to have an operation or not enough yet, so I'll probably have to go back in a few months. In terms of my actual health, when it does start growing, I'm faced with a situation that my health will deteriorate with the symptoms, basically because it's putting more pressure on my brain. These can affect things like my vision. I get double vision, I get nausea, vomiting, my balance goes even worse, I have trouble coordinating, I have trouble with my vocal cords, swallowing, and these things are all affected by it, and as it increases it gets worse and worse, and eventually it becomes totally debilitating, and eventually if it wasn't operated on it would kill me, a very sort of slow painful death as I've been told. The other option is to have surgery. Now this surgery is by no means straightforward, like all major surgery and in particular brain surgery. It does carry a lot of risks with it. The actual surgery is very precise, so they can't use radiation or things like that. So a consultant once told me they're talking about the distances of or the measurements of wet tissue paper, they have to be that precise. The sort of risks are to the side of my face, to my vocal cords, to my swallowing, and of course it could potentially kill me. So these are the results I'm waiting on, and I suppose the phrase, it's been a bit between a rock and a hard place because either outcome is not going to be easy. The thing is obviously now how, what the results are, and at least on the good side, at least I'll know tomorrow a little bit more about what we're dealing with, and I might have some time scale, because this constant waiting around and limbo of not knowing what's going on with my health is very, very difficult to deal with. If I can talk a little bit about my experience so far with going for scan results. Generally I'd say it's not been very pleasant at all and been extremely stressful. One thing I would state is, and I'm obviously aware of, the results can't be changed, but maybe the process can be made a little bit easier. If I can just explain some of the situations that I've been in. I think initially, as I've been going for scan results now for 16 years, it's always very stressful because obviously of the outcome of results are so difficult. There have been times when I've got ready to go for my appointment and I found that I can't actually walk, my legs just go to jelly. It's all anxiety and stress. I get very wound up. I've gone through all emotions. I've been angry, I've been a lot of the time I just felt I couldn't do anything. I would just have to sit round all day. I couldn't focus on anything other than just physically wait to get into the hospital and get these potentially life-changing results. What I've actually done this time is I've kept myself busy over the weekend, because as I've learnt over the years, nothing can change the results. But I am aware that the process can continue to be very stressful. Going back to my very first appointment, and when I was first told about this tumour, I was advised by people to ask questions, ask what the situation would be. So when he talked about surgery, I asked him what would be the risks involved with the operation, and his first comment was quite blasé, and he said, "Oh, apart from the fact it can kill you." Now again, that's not the most reassuring way of being told news. Yes, it's factually correct, but it's quite shocking to hear that, and maybe there are easier, better ways to actually deal with situations like that. I've been for another appointment, bearing in mind the time scale that I'm waiting for these results. and often, as you're aware, there's long waiting times, and I've had to wait sometimes 3 hours over my appointment when it was due for various reasons. I have then, after having a long wait, and my anxiety levels have gone through the roof waiting for these results, only to finally go into the room. On one occasion, he didn't actually have the results in front of him. He started chatting to me about my health and this, that and the other, but with no results. Now, I was with a friend, and at that point she said, I thought I was going to pass out, never mind you. I mean, I wasn't there for a consultation as such. I just wanted to know, was this tumour growing or not? Anyway, it had actually gone to a different department by mistake. And so he just said, oh, do you mind taking a seat in the waiting room for another 20 minutes? You know, not the best way of receiving information like this. So again, these procedures, I often think they're drawn out to the point of torturing you. Now, none of this is intentional, and I'm sure people aren't doing it on purpose, but, you know, patient stress levels are through the roof, waiting on seeing if they're going to have an operation that's going to kill them, or they're going to be horrendously ill, and yet you have to wait and wait and wait. I think last time I went, and again I'd had a really long wait over my appointment time, so I was already more and more wound up. When I went in, my consultant was actually having a look at the scans and comparing one computer with the other to look at changes. Now, this went on, I don't think he actually spoke to me, but this went on for a good 6 minutes of just looking at these scan results. And again, I thought, I'm going to pass out. The anxiety, what's going on? Why couldn't that have been done before I'd gone in the room? At least if somebody's coming in, be prepared about what you're going to tell them. Don't prolong this agony any longer than it has to be. And I think maybe as many of you are thinking, as other people have said, why put up with it? This is wrong, this is terrible. Well, yeah, I agree. But again, as I said to people, what do you do about it? I think I've mentioned it with other things. It's very difficult. What do I do? Just say I'm not putting up with this. I'll go home. Not get the scan results, not know what's going on with my health. Or I could spend days like today sitting writing very nice letters of complaint to be put on a folder in the hospital, in doctors' surgeries. What's the point of that? At the moment, I'm focusing. I don't actually care about whose fault it is or who's done what. I'm not out to get people sacked. That's the least of my concern. My concern is what's going on with my health. Am I going to live or die, and what do I have to go through? So I've much better things to do, I'm afraid, than sit and write letters of who's done what. To me, as I've said before, I don't care who's at fault, but this communication often between different departments and professionals could be alleviated to make this path a little bit smoother. Again, I've had situations to show just how restricted you are. Last time when I was waiting to have surgery, I was actually very, very ill at the time, and it was crucial that I went to see my consultant or registrar to see what was happening and what was going to happen with surgery. So this appointment was very important because I was getting more and more ill. Now, at the time, I was hoping just to drive to the hospital for my appointment, because I don't actually have anyone to take me as such. I didn't have family around. People assume for some reason that everyone has a carer or a husband or a partner. That's not always the case. I didn't in that situation. I had friends who worked away. I had friends who were doing various things. There isn't always somebody there to help out. Now, I was in that situation, and I was actually too physically ill to drive. I was so ill I couldn't hardly move my head for vomiting, and I'd been in bed all day, and I thought, I've got to get to the hospital. How on earth do I do it? I'd rung them. An ambulance had to be booked 2 days before. I didn't know 2 days before if I was going to be ill. I was hoping not to be. Anyway, what actually happened was eventually I had to call a friend who was in work to come and get me. and had to physically help me get dressed. I was that ill. At the time, she said to me, I'd go in your pyjamas, show people how ill you are. Now, again, your own self-respect and pride stops you doing that. I just said, there's no way I can do that. It would make a point, but, you know, you're feeling vulnerable enough. So I literally had to go to the hospital carrying a carrier bag because I was being sick every few minutes. And I was thinking, oh God, don't let me be sick in the waiting room. But if I hadn't gone, what would have happened? They'd have put me back on the waiting list for an appointment for another 3 months of enduring this illness. So I had to get there. And anyway, this is why I say that it's all very well saying this is wrong and this procedure's wrong and that procedure's wrong. But when it comes to it, when you're seriously ill, what choice do you have? You have to get there somehow or other. Sit through these waiting times, sit through the stress and agony of it, because otherwise, you know, what do you do? I mean, I'm not somebody that will put up with things that are wrong, and when I'm fit and healthy, believe me, I can stand up for myself. Like a lot of people, I can argue, I can put my point across. When I'm ill and vomiting, it's a lot harder. I did have a situation once where I did argue with a registrar, and again the situation, when I look back, was ridiculous. Basically, because of all these operations I'd had, I've tried every method of dealing with this illness, and I thought I can't take any more. The risks, just the whole procedure, I thought I can't face that surgery again. And I thought, that's it, I've had enough, so I'm not doing it. So I went back and I saw this registrar, and again, obviously they're trying to help, but they're very focused on, this is what happens, this is what you do, we'll do the surgery. Now, I just said to him, I'm not having it. And there'd never been any discussion again emotionally for me. I had nobody to discuss anything with other than the sheer physical situation. So all I could do was speak to this person who was focused only on the physical impact, not on what it was doing to me psychologically. So when I spoke to him, I said, I'm not having the operation again. And he looked at me as I was insane and said, well, you have to. I said, well, I don't have to. He said, well, it'll kill you. I mean, it was almost like an argument in the playground. So I said, well, so what? I said, and I was very angry as well. I said, well, you can't cure me. Because this is the other thing, that again, a lot of emotional, psychological issues coming up. I keep having to have this repeated surgery, and yet it doesn't actually get rid of it totally. But I think that, you see, again, it was a challenge to his professionalism, his ability. And rather than looking at my position, he got very defensive about what he could do, and became actually quite nasty. And it was like a real battle of wills. I mean, although it wasn't funny, looking back it was. So I said, well, you can't cure me. And his response to that was, well, I could cut half your brain out. I mean, that was the level of discussion I had about my psychological well-being. And again, you know, people said, oh, isn't that awful? But that's what happened, and this is what I'm dealing with. And then he said, well, eventually you'll become so ill, you'll pass out and become unconscious, and we'll take you in and do the surgery anyway. There's my emotional support, fantastic. And as I've said, you know, that sort of level of support I've had has continued. This year, I asked for support, and as I explained recently, that these referrals have been bandied round. I've still got no appointment, I haven't seen anybody to speak to, I've got no psychological support, nothing has changed for me. So I'm going back into the exact same situation. What I have got is loads of tablets. I'm on tablets for anxiety. They've been increased. It's very easy to increase tablets. I'm on tablets for blood pressure because of the anxiety, and this is what I'm dealing with. And yet not one person has been able to say what's happening with you psychologically, emotionally, with this massive situation that's going on. I've even seen articles about the tremendous psychological support. Nobody would go through brain surgery without being having consultations. It's great, the glossy mags are brilliant, But when I see it, I just think how ridiculous. The reality and the theory are just not meeting up. What people think are happening isn't happening, and it's very, very frightening. And again, this isn't about me. This is an example of what's happening to people. That's why I wanted to take the time to talk to people about it. I haven't got anybody, I've got friends that I can talk to about how I feel emotionally, but friends, it's very difficult, because the last thing you want to do is upset your friends and hurt them. You need somebody a little bit more distant who can offer some professional advice on how to deal with things. I mean, what am I going to say to people? I'm faced with this awful decision of life-threatening surgery or a terrible, slow, painful death. What's the other option? I just won't do either anymore. Am I going to say that to my friend? Oh, I think I'll just top myself. What else can I do? Well, that's the situation I'm in. And I'm laughing because it's so bizarre. In this day and age, when there's so much emphasis on the emotional, psychological care of patients, all I can say, and I'm not out to criticise, I'm just out here to say this is what's happening, this is my position. I'm going in the same, with the same support that I've had for 16 years to discuss potential brain surgery, with not one conversation from anybody about how I feel about this, how I'm going to cope with it, how I'm going to deal with it. And that, unfortunately, is the reality that I'm dealing with.